everybody, thank you so much for joining us on the Transportation and Logistics Clubhouse. Very honored to be here today with two distinguished members of OOIDA. And, it's a pleasure to have you guys on stage. For the folks who have never heard of OOIDA, that's the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association. And you guys were started back in 1973, and you work on behalf of owner operators. You advocate, and I love that type of stuff. So it's a pleasure to have you both on stage. Bryce and Colin, look, whoever wants to go first. Actually, let's just say Colin. All right, Colin first. Look, you guys have both been servicing, just working on behalf of communities for a very long time. I'm looking at your background. You both have been helping, advocate on behalf of people your entire career. Why do you think that you were drawn to that type of work, Colin?
It goes back to my first job as an adult, my first real job, where I had honest to goodness responsibilities. It was working for a congressman who actually represented the area of the country where I grew up. So I took it very personally. I wanted to be doing good work for the folks back home. And that just kind of opened my eyes to the world of transportation and transportation policy. And from there, I went to lobby on behalf of an industry, the cement industry, which also happened to be a very consequential industry in the area where I grew up. So from there, I came over to trucking. I was looking for a new gig, had to make some changes, and found an organization that really represented a lot of hardworking, honest people, straightforward people, people with a lot of common sense, people that want government off their back, and that kind of fit well with my outlook. So it's been a happy marriage over the last 6 years.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, Colin, it's a pleasure to have you on stage.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And Bryce, what about you, brother? Do you have anything that you can pinpoint as to what led you to this line of work?
I think it's similar to what Colin said. I think I was, and I also, Colin, I actually worked on Capitol Hill for a few years before moving to the advocacy and lobbying side. Colin and I actually worked for the same member of Congress from Pennsylvania. We only overlapped for like 3 months. So we didn't work together for all that long, but just happened to work for the same lawmaker. I think I was drawn into, the legislative side of things from the policy perspective, just kind of having an interest in policy and having an interest in how decisions are made that affect the entire country. But I think from working in the congressman's office kind of opened my eyes to just how diverse, just how many different interests there are that are before Congress, and also just seeing how members of Congress develop that relationship with different businesses in their district and with constituents in their district. So I think that's kind of what drew me more into policy and kind of drew me into the advocacy side of things, is seeing how, people, whether they be businesses or individuals, can really have an effect on policy.
Yes, sir. Well, again, it's a pleasure to have you both here represent OOIDA. My brother did join the stage. Desi, what's up, man?
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm out here on the road, almost back in Georgia, but I'm grinding, man, fighting the fight. Definitely great topic today. Just here to contribute any way that I can.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And for everybody who don't know, Desi and I have been rocking together for a very long time, ever since the inception of the Transportation and Logistics Clubhouse. I found this brother that was up here teaching, giving back to the community, trucking principles. And then I got an opportunity to meet him. So Desi was kind enough to put me in contact with OOIDA. So thank you for that, brother. I'm happy you helped facilitate. Yeah, I'm happy you helped facilitate this conversation, man, because it's necessary. But yeah, without further ado, actually, if you don't mind, Colin and
Sure.
Bryce, let's talk about OOIDA just a little bit more, so folks who might be interested, they can get that information. So around about how many owner operators are currently a part of your organization?
Well, we have 150,000 members across the country. It's a
Wow.
pretty significant number, and we often nag them and tell them, imagine what we could do in Washington if all 150,000 of you were active in politics and policy. But the fact of the matter is, we do have a great grassroots support, which helps us on a lot of initiatives. Most of those members are owner operators. However, about a quarter of generally of our members are also employee or company drivers. So folks working for larger carriers. But our bread and butter member is the kind of typical owner operator. Also, drivers who have their trucks leased to larger motor carriers. And like you mentioned, we were founded in the 70s by truckers. Truckers realized no one in Washington and state capitals was really paying attention to their needs at the time. So the best way to go about addressing that is to start your own advocacy organization. And here we are, decades later. We've got about 300 employees total. And I would love to say most of them are involved in advocacy, but there's about 6 or 7 of us who make a living working around policy and politics. But the rest of the folks at headquarters are there to provide assistance to drivers, to our members, whether it be enforcement issues, compliance issues, paying your IFTA fees. It runs the gamut. Whatever needs truckers have, we probably have someone at headquarters that can help them navigate whatever difficulties they're having or clarify anything, get them out of trouble in some cases. But if we don't, we know who does. So we can certainly help folks find their way through what is a very complex and often difficult industry and occupation. So that's kind of a brief look at who we are as an organization. If you think about who we are in Washington, D.C., we kind of consider ourselves the wild card of trucking. There's an organization like the American Trucking Association. It's kind of the big dog in trucking. They represent large carriers, FedEx, UPS, JB Hunt. They approach things typically from a corporate standpoint, an employer standpoint. Opposite side of the spectrum, you've got the Teamsters Union, kind of the traditional union organization for professional drivers. They approach things from a very employee, company driver driven perspective. And then you kind of have us in between those two. We represent small business drivers. We also represent employee drivers. But really, we try to keep the owner operators as the focus of our advocacy and really make a voice, kind of a two-pronged voice, because every one of our members makes their living behind the wheel. So we want to do what's best for the driver as far as their safety is concerned, their success is concerned. But we want to do the same for small businesses, which still play a really significant role in trucking. I mean, everyone knows those big businesses like FedEx and UPS, but not many folks, and I should say not enough folks in Washington know that small businesses still make up a big portion of the industry. So that's what we're here to do. Let them know.
Okay, cool. I appreciate that, brother. Bryce, did you have anything to say? Because, I just wanted to give you that opportunity just in case.
No, I think that's a really comprehensive overview. I think just again,
it was, man. It was awesome.
I think the thing just to stress, and Colin covered it well, but just the thing to stress is, too often in DC, I think when people hear trucking, they think trucking companies and they somehow lump drivers in with like the trucking company's interest. So what's so important about what we do is, and Colin already said it, but we really focus on that driver perspective. What's good for drivers and what for people who want to make.
Yes, sir, Bryce. I think you might be going out just a bit.
About promoting safety because, there
he is.
Oh,
you're good, bro. Go ahead. You
able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. We got some really nasty storms rolling through here, so I don't know if that's part of it, but yeah, I saw a big flash here.
It's been crazy in Atlanta too, man. It's been crazy down here.
Yeah. So hopefully I can lets me stick around. But as I was saying, so when you talk to offices and you tell them, no, we really are about making the road safe because that's where our drivers make a living, or we really are about what's going to help compensation or what's going to help working conditions. That's what makes us a wild card. Is we're just trying to make the profession as sustainable and attractive as possible. So.
And if I can, 2 more points. Sorry, I'm on a roll now. We don't fall into the typical conservative or liberal or moderate even political holes everyone wants to put people in. We work with Republicans. We work with Democrats. When one party's in control, we have a list of priorities that they can help us with, and the other party can help us fight against. And it switches when control of the House and the Senate and the White House switch. So we have to be nimble. We have to be flexible. We have to get along with everyone. That doesn't mean we don't pick fights. I mean, let's be honest.
Right.
We represent professional drivers. They don't mince words. They don't hold back their opinion when someone asks them how they feel about an issue. And thankfully, OOIDA has given us, as lobbyists, as advocates here in Washington, D.C., a long leash to do the same. So I think initially, our brand was kind of difficult for some folks to wrap their minds around, because everyone wants to be a pleaser here in Washington, D.C. But once people started realizing that the word they were getting from OOIDA was always honest, I think we became a much more reliable source of information on the trucking industry for the folks on Capitol Hill and at the Department of Transportation. And that has enabled us in more recent years to really go on the offensive on a number of issues when previously we had kind of been playing defense on just about everything. So don't think of us as we're involved in politics on a daily basis, day in, day out, but we don't necessarily identify as any certain type of political party or persuasion or ideology. We have to get along with everyone, but we're not afraid to be the skunk at a picnic.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hey, man, sometimes you do have to pick that fight and, just slug it out. So
sometimes that's the most fun too. So
yes,
if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I'm very appreciative of the overview, fellas. But look, you said 150,000 members. That means that you got to be doing something right, So kudos to you guys. And for those who are interested, who might be listening now or will listen to this later, what's like what's the process of becoming a member? Is it free? How much do you got to pay? What's the situation?
It's not free. Nothing's free in this game. But,
I hear you.
But that said, our membership dues are only $35. They're very low compared to
$35 a year, just to declare.
Yeah, that's solid.
Yeah, so we keep those numbers low because we want to keep our membership numbers high, and we provide insurance to our members who qualify for it, and thankfully that supports a lot of our advocacy efforts, but also a lot of our compliance and enforcement efforts back at headquarters. So that also enables us to keep membership low because we want as many truckers involved in this process as possible. And the way to do that is to make sure you're not dipping into their wallets too much.
Correct.
Sorry, it's 45 for 1 year. We misspoke. I had that number on the top of my head, but just want to make sure in case anyone calls in.
You can tell them Colin sent you, and they'll give you
yeah.
All right, perfect. Thanks for that quick catch, Kyle. Bryce. I truly appreciate that, man. Okay, so look, you guys are OOIDA. We got a nice background. The reason why we're here is to talk about AB5. Prayerfully, by the end of this, we have a little bit of time to talk about some other initiatives that you guys have going on, especially with that infrastructure bill. Some good ways that we can spend that money to help owner operators. But AB5, where do you guys want to start? Because it's so much going on with AB5. I can give a quick background, the rundown of the definition. If for the folks who are listening in, but if you guys are like completely versed, I'll hand that over to you if you want me to.
Bryce is proud. I'm going to put him on the spot because Bryce is probably the most knowledgeable person about AB5 in Washington. So go ahead, Bryce.
Yeah, I'm happy to give an overview of the bill, really. So AB5, as I'm sure a lot of people who are here know, is a new worker classification law that was passed in California at the end of 2019, and it established what's called the ABC test. And the law said you are an employee unless you can meet all three prongs of this ABC test. And for the trucking industry, the ABC test is problematic because of the B prong. And the B prong says essentially that you can't be doing the same sort of work for the entity that you're you can't be doing the same sort of work as the business that you're working for. So in the trucking industry, if you're an owner operator leased on to a carrier that is a motor carrier, it's a problem because you're doing the same work that they do. And so as a result, the fear is that owner operators leased to a carrier would have to be employees under this new law in California. And so what we've had going on over the past few years are court challenges that worked their way and appeals up to the Supreme Court, but it wasn't taken by the Supreme Court. So now we're in a situation where it appears California may be ready to enforce the law. So we've known for a few years that this might be coming, but now enforcement might start. And really, the issue is California has been mum on how this will be enforced, what its effects will be, really what exactly the law means. So I hope that's about as quick of an overview as I think I can give. But Jory, I don't know if there's any questions you have or any other things that might be helpful for other folks to understand.
Right. No, perfect. Thank you so much for that overview. And let's just add to that a bit. You said that this has been going on for a few years now. So for everybody who's kind of new to this is the timeline. So at the end of April 2018, the California Supreme Court established that ABC test that this brother just spoke of. And with that, it was to rule against one of the companies that did same-day delivery out in Cali. Okay. By the end of 2018, it was brought, AB5 was brought as an official precedent. It was introduced officially in December of 2018. And by the end of September of 2019, it was actually signed into law. Okay. A couple months afterwards, so November 2019, there was a lawsuit that was filed on behalf of the membership in opposition of this ruling. And as a result, we eventually went into this injunction at the end of 2019. There was nothing going on until 2021, nothing at all. Eventually, in October of 2021, the Supreme Court decided not to hear the petition, but that injunction stayed up until June 30th of this year, when it was officially denied. The Supreme Court officially denied to hear it at all. So now it's back in our face to say, how is AB5, Assembly Bill 5, going to be affecting the drivers, the owner operators based out of California? So, thank you so much again for that overview, Bryce. I guess my question would be, are there any positives that you guys can see in AB5? Is there anything that you can see that would be worth, the owner operators advocating for it?
So I don't think to be clear, we opposed AB5, and AB5 is not something that we would advocate for.
Correct.
With that said, we kind of liken AB5 to taking a sledgehammer to a problem that needs a scalpel. And you mentioned the court case that kind of brought about some of the changes in California that eventually led to this, the introduction of AB5. And I think a large part of the interest in AB5 and changing this is kind of like the talk around the gig economy, Uber, Lyft, stuff like that. But also part of it is because of the treatment of drivers in the ports in California, and we know that there are drivers that really are misclassified in the ports. More broadly speaking, we hear from our members who have been involved in lease purchase agreements or lease to own agreements, where essentially a driver's paying lease payments to a company only to lease that truck back to the same company. So what I'm getting around to is we know there's instances of misclassification. And sure, maybe AB5 would address some of those egregious cases of misclassification, especially, maybe in the ports in California. But there's better ways to fix those problems than AB5. So I think it's fair to say that, yes, maybe there are some drivers that will benefit. There are some drivers that are really not independent contractors that would maybe benefit under this law. But we think there's better ways to help those drivers out and address those cases of misclassification than just like throwing out, going with this whole AB5 or sorry, the ABC test and, throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes,
yeah, I think there's going back to when I said where we kind of fall on the political spectrum here in DC. I think this is a good example of it where, this is obviously a California issue, but it's becoming a DC issue. But I think you look at the large motor carriers and they'll tell you there's no problem. Nothing needs to be addressed. Everything's fine. You talk to the labor movements and they say, well, everyone's misclassified. They should all be employees. And what gets lost in between are our views and our members where we're saying, yes, there is certainly a problem in California with misclassification. That doesn't mean AB5 is the solution to it when it screws up independent contractor status for a lot of folks who enjoy it and benefit from it. And unfortunately, when laws are made, oftentimes that nuance is completely lost because people either want to give the big corporations a win or they want to give the labor movements a win. And in between, small businesses get the squeeze. And unfortunately, that's what's happened with California. And oftentimes, no matter how loud we yell, we don't see results. And that's when I go back to the point I made earlier. If 150,000 of our members voiced concerns about this back in 2019, we might have potentially had a different outcome. But that just reinforces the fact that you can't sit back and watch government affairs happen. You have to be engaged. You have to be a part of the advocacy because sooner or later they're going to come for you. And I think that's the case with AB5.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You mentioned this group earlier. Teamsters Union. They are in favor of AB5 for those local delivery drivers. You know what I mean? Yeah. They want as much protection for those guys as possible. But again, I like the way you said it, a sledgehammer where it needs a scalpel. Where do we go from here? I don't know what else to say, man. Like, where do we go from here?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think
look into your crystal ball, Bryce.
Yeah, no, I think I just say I don't know because I don't know that the state knows where this goes from here.
Absolutely.
If I had to guess, I think the first as California moves to enforce AB5 in the trucking industry, my guess would be that they would probably start in places like the ports, in those instances where they think they can probably pretty clearly win a case or pretty clearly find that someone's being misclassified. I guess that because if they want this law to be effective, they don't want to go and try and challenge something only to lose. So I think the first place where we might see this is enforcements in the ports. With that said, I think it's then going to it's going to be up to how does this play out in the courts again, because I think one of the things is all the legal challenges that we've seen up to this point have been before the law has even been enforced. So one, I think there still are some legal challenges that may be brought against the law before we see enforcement. Specifically, you have kind of commerce, and this is getting into the weeds, but commerce clause concerns with the Constitution. So can for example, if you have a driver coming from a different state going into California, does AB5 kind of interfere with, federal laws ensuring, the free flow of interstate commerce, if that makes sense? So we think there may be legal challenges surrounding the law that way.
Right. Well,
but even once you get, go ahead.
I was about to say, just to add into that, right now it's even people wondering if they take a load going into California, will they have to deadhead out of California, to even pick up something else so that they are in compliance per se?
Yeah, 100%. And that gets back to we just don't know. We don't know how the state's going to do this. So I think that's one of the areas where you may see legal challenges. But then even after you start to move to enforcement, if the state brings enforcement against a carrier that they think is misclassifying drivers, that's going to play out in the courts and each side is going to present their arguments. So how that plays out in the courts there is going to shape how the law is going to be enforced, if there's going to be any changes to the law. And from there, the next question we get is, is this going to go to other states? So I think
Right.
how it plays out in California is going to influence what other states do. And maybe I am naive, and people can come back and say I was wrong, but part of me has to think, if other states look how this rollout is going, I can't imagine anyone's going to be like, yes, sign me up for this. So we'll see, though. I could be wrong.
Bryce.
I know. I probably am. Maybe, yeah. I know people just can't think clearly when they're looking at these issues, and they'd rather just kind of charge ahead and do it for political reasons than practical reasons. But, I do think there has to be some element of other states looking at this and saying, well, maybe we should be a little more careful. And to that end, there are other states that have the ABC test on the books, but with slight modifications or slight exceptions. So I do think there's a possibility that other states at least kind of take a closer look at this before, just copying and pasting what California does.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you do see a lot of times that the front runners, the people who make the most money or have the busiest ports, or just like the most intensity as they go, sometimes the industry goes, and I guess in this case maybe some of the other states may go. So I'm praying that everybody just puts their thinking cap on before we get too hasty with everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, when you look at how implementation and kind of exemptions have gone for AB5 more broadly in California. You have AB5 that allegedly is supposed to apply to all workers in the state. But in the original law, you had exemptions for certain professions, certain occupations, and certain industries. Then the legislature passed a follow-up law to AB5, amending it, that provided additional exemptions. And then you have Proposition 22, which was the ballot initiative that essentially exempted, again, gig workers, Lyft, Uber, and all those different companies. So at the end of the day, we're kind of wondering, well, who's left? It's kind of, a lot of it is trucking. And so I think that's another question of, one, how does this play out in California? And two, how do other states handle this? Will they have all these same exemptions?
And the frustration there, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners feel it, is that our industry is one where the independent contractor model tends to work. It works more often than it doesn't work. Most of our members are independent contractors, and they want to preserve that status. They don't want to change it. So it's a difficult pill to swallow when a bill is moving through a state legislature addressing primarily the gig economy. It's being spurred by the gig economy, and they end up getting exempted, and we're the ones left being on the hook for this when we've had an independent contractor model that's been working for decades. It's a real frustration, and Bryce is not naive for thinking other states will replicate California, no matter how disastrous this rollout can be. We see it all the time. We see it in environmental regs almost on a yearly basis in trucking. So it would not be any surprise if the West Coast follows suit, or if New York, New Jersey follows suit. But I think at this juncture, we probably have a better coalition of opposition against it to raise more of a stink in these state capitals if they start moving towards that direction.
Yes, sir. Okay, so look, just to throw some numbers out there, this affects roughly 70,000 owner operators in California. So that's a lot of people in my mind. And just to be specific, it's not targeting everybody that has a truck. You can be a for hire owner operator. You have your own truck. You have your own authority. You are your own boss. This law does not touch you at all. It's more so those folks who have kind of leased equipment and they don't have their own authority, so they're leveraging another company's authority that does the exact same type of work, and they're getting their freight most of the time from that. Oh no, not most of the time. Exclusively from that company. So those are the people who are really, those are the owner operators that are really being targeted. I don't want to use that word, but are really being, focused on when it comes to AB5. And for you guys, do you believe AB5 unravels any of the work that OOIDA itself has done to, get specific things enacted? Like, is this rolling back some of your efforts, you believe?
That's a great question, actually.
I would kind of say I don't know that it could potentially kind of roll back stuff. I think it definitely ignores a lot of the work that OOIDA has done, and I'm talking like over the years. And I'm specifically thinking about like the federal leasing regulations. And I think you made a really important distinction there. You have owner operators, and that refers to owner operators who have their own authority, which we believe should be largely untouched by this law. But then you also have leased on owner operators. And, there's, as I'm sure a lot of people listening know, there's specific regulations that dictate, federal regulations that dictate what has to be part of a lease agreement between a truck owner and between that owner operator and the carrier that they're working with. And those are designed in part to protect owner operators, to protect the public, to promote transparency. And those regulations are, they are the way they are in part because of OOIDA's work and things that, we've lobbied for, again, going back probably 30, 40 years here, going back decades. So I think that's what's frustrating about this is we go in and talk to people who are like, you do realize if you were to try to implement something like this, it's going to conflict with federal regulations that are on the books that are there to protect the owner-operator business model, and people have been using, like Colin said, for a very long time. So I guess, I think I guess you could kind of say it sort of unravels things in a way. I think of it more like it's just kind of ignoring what's in place already, and that's one of the frustrations, one of the real big frustrations we have.
Big picture, if states want to start classifying kind of your classic owner-operators who lease onto larger carriers as employees, that does a lot of unraveling for us, because our main goal is to enact policies and promote policies in Washington and in state capitals that support small business truckers. And if they have a status or a classification that benefits them, we want to make sure that stays intact. So immediately, maybe not that big I shouldn't say not that big an impact, but we're certainly frustrated. Our members are frustrated. But if this starts becoming a snowball effect, I think it really could be threatening to what we want to preserve as far as small business ownership in the trucking industry looks like.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, fellas, thank you so much for your candid response on that question. No, seriously. But I guess to take it from a different level, like every single week, we here on the Transportation and Logistics Clubhouse, we partner with FreightWaves Sonar Team. And essentially, we tell folks where they should position their trucks to take advantage of market conditions. But in doing that, we're also looking at tender rejection. So the percentage of loads that are getting rejected, if a larger percentage of loads are getting rejected, that means that you have more bargaining power, more negotiation room when you're dealing in the spot market. So I've been asking the same question since AB5, the injunction ended, to say, hey, what is the California market looking like? Is it more freight being rejected? But surprisingly, it's staying the same right now. It hasn't had too much of an impact inside of California. However, we just found out that freight going into California is down about 25% over the last month. So, I think that this is, it's hard to say that if it's directly impacted by AB5, but freight is already starting to change the way that it's moving. And I'm just interested to see if this is going to have larger reverberations, like just things that just completely change the way freight is moving on the West Coast. People have kind of suggested that there'll be more transloading opportunities right outside of California. So, neighboring states, and maybe that'll be the place where, that'll get the freight bumps. But I'm just excited to see where everything goes from here. As far as the owner operators that you guys might be hearing from, do you hear anything specific fear-wise, like what they're most afraid of when it comes to the way that, they're living their American dream?
Yeah, I think it's at this point it's uncertainty, and Bryce mentioned that California hasn't begun enforcement. So we look at the actual and eventual enforcement of this as potentially having, I guess you could say, the biggest impact. We're already hearing folks are pulling out of California. They're not going to enter California. They're going to move operations to another state. We're hearing it. It's not prevalent, but we're still hearing it. But I think once enforcement kicks in, we'll keep our eyes on things, because that could have much more of a seismic impact on things.
Yeah.
Bryce, am I wrong on that?
No, I think you're right, and I think it's definitely uncertainty. I think it's also everyone's handling it a little bit differently. I think, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but we hear about, you read some carriers have already started to see if their owner operators will move out of state, move out of California. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more leased on owner operators starting to file for their own authority and have carriers open up their own brokerage firms. I think that's a possibility as well. I think there's also the possibility. You talk to our president and CEO Todd Spencer. He'll tell you about how he worked under the 2-paycheck system, and where a driver's essentially leasing the truck and getting a check for leasing their truck to a carrier, but they also operate as an employee for that carrier. So, is it possible that some carriers may move to a model similar to that? So, I think to answer your question, how is this affecting drivers and what are we hearing? I think it is uncertainty. I think we have heard a little bit about people who have been encouraged to move out of state or encouraged to get their own authority. But I think we're going to kind of see a little bit of everything until California, shows their hand on how they're going to enforce it. Yeah.
No, I feel it, man. Look, I knew that when we scheduled this conversation, it wasn't going to be too much to really hang our hat on, because there hasn't been any official enforcement just yet. But I really just want to say thank you so much for sharing your thoughts about how AB5 currently is affecting the industry. I did want to see if you guys were willing to allow folks to ask questions if they had any in the audience. Would you guys be willing for that?
Sure, but just remember, we're not lawmakers from California.
Yeah, true. Very true. So I just opened hand raising. So if you guys had any questions, anybody in the audience, please feel free to raise your hand. Desi, I know that you're driving, brother, but if you had any question, please feel free to go ahead and ask. And while we are doing that, I did just want to throw out some of those key points that they said as far as options for drivers. Nobody wants to be forced to leave their home, but if this is something that is going to change the way that your business is running, you do have the option of moving out of Cali. You can get your own authority so that you are indeed independent and doing your own thing. And lastly, if folks are actually taking loads into Cali, you might have to negotiate higher rates on the inbound so that it can support the deadhead that you'll face exiting that location. And as far as the trucking companies, Bryce did mention a couple of these, which is, of course, you can stop doing business in California. You can shift to that the employee-employer model, which is what this whole thing is about. And you can separate the carrier into an actual brokerage and a carrier so that you're doing business that way. So those are the things that I've kind of noted down. But again, if there were any questions, please go ahead and raise your hand. I definitely, want to respect everybody's time on stage. But look, if we didn't have any questions right now, if you guys can speak on this, I want you to, spill any secrets, but, are there any current initiatives that you guys have going on that, whether it be, plans for truck parking or anything major that you guys are hoping to get some attention on and, some more, steam on, please feel free to let us know now so that we can also aid you in those efforts.
Yeah, we'll spill everything. I mean, truck parking is a top priority for us as far as legislation is concerned here in Washington, D.C. We've been leading the charge to get federal funding set aside for building truck parking capacity. I know a lot of folks have seen some money spent on quote unquote truck parking initiatives. A lot of that's been going to technology, signage, apps, stuff like that. We don't think that's a good use of money. I should say, we don't think that's the most effective use of money. We think that there's a shortage of truck spots. So we need to be laying more pavement, converting more existing pavement into safe, reliable truck parking. So we have a bill that's moving through the U.S. House of Representatives. It went through the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure last month. It's now awaiting some time on the House floor. Hopefully we'll see that in September, but it would provide over $750 million in the next 4 years to build out truck parking capacity. We really need help getting the Senate to get involved on this one. They've been much more lackadaisical when it comes to truck parking than the House has. The House has been very aggressive. They've been working with us day in and day out to really address the issue by providing funding. Where we need the help is in the Senate. They've just been kind of dragging a little too much on truck parking for our liking. So you can find out more information on truck parking. We have a website called fightingfortruckers.com. It kind of lays out a lot of the policy initiatives we're working on in Washington, D.C. Truck parking is a big part of it. You can also find out who your senators and who your members of Congress are. Give them a call and tell them to vote for it on the House floor. If they're a member of Congress, and if they're a senator, tell them to support truck parking, to do something. I mean, just to do something on truck parking. Bryce also works very deeply in truck parking, and I'm sure I missed something, so I'll turn it over to him.
No. I think that more or less covers it. I think the other issue that we're working on, we're really excited that's finally moving forward, is legislation to repeal the overtime exemption for employee drivers. So right now, the Fair Labor Standards Act guarantees employees overtime pay when they work over 40 hours in a week, but truck drivers are exempted from that. So we think that was passed back in 1938. So we think it's trucking industry has changed quite a bit since then, and we think that exemption has far outlived its usefulness. So we've been really trying to build support for that and essentially make sure that drivers are paid for all their time and really finally people start respecting their time and counting all the hours that they work.
Yes, sir.
And let's be honest, both initiatives are only going to be pushed vigorously by an organization like us who represents the men and women who make their living behind the wheel. I mean, we have support from other industry stakeholders. ATA supports us on truck parking. The Teamsters support us on FLSA. But really, both of those initiatives are OOIDA driven. We responded to the needs of our members. There's no truck parking, and that resulted in the development of legislation. And our members aren't getting the compensation they deserve. They're not getting paid for all the hours they work. So that led to the FLSA bill as well. And now it's just trying to get both enacted into law, which is a challenge and a frustration because things move pretty slowly here in Washington, D.C. But any support your listeners could offer on those two fronts would be greatly appreciated.
Yes, sir. Okay. Well, I'm happy to do my part and bring in attention to this. I mean, truck parking is very huge for me, and I'm gonna speak on it. But even the last part of just paying truckers for their time, like, it's crazy to think the percentage of items that everyone has in their homes and what percentage of those things were at some point delivered on a truck, and we're having these conversations. I was raised by a trucker, man. The man I love, he's my stepfather, but he raised me. You know what I mean? And just the fact that he's been a truck driver for 30 plus years. It's I just know that he's done a lot, and everybody that is in the industry as a truck driver is doing a lot to make sure that we have the comforts and all the delicacies that we're accustomed to. So pay those boys and those men and women. So pay them. As far as truck parking, man, every single morning I'm in the gym 5 a.m. ish, something like that. I'm at Planet Fitness, and I'm in Atlanta. I mean, I'm in the city, and there might be a truck that had to pull off the highway because maybe they were running out of hours or maybe they were sleepy, but they've tried to park in the parking lot that holds my gym. And it just makes me sad all the times I'm coming out and I'm seeing them booted. And I'm like, dang, the inconvenience that's about to cause that driver, the people that own the parking lot don't even realize. And it's because of a shortage of, driver parking. So truck parking. So, I'm just praying that we can get some steam behind that, especially here in the Atlanta area. But I'm gonna step off my soapbox. But
we understand you, because Georgia and Atlanta is a place where our members really struggle to find parking. Anywhere up and down the 95 corridor is often very difficult. So we've been hitting up those congressional offices pretty hard, trying to get them supportive of this. But truck parking is a good example of the industry coming together to try and address a major need for drivers. It doesn't happen very often. And I said the bill passed through a committee in the House. It passed with unanimous support between Republicans and Democrats. So this is a great issue where everyone has really come together and said, this is a problem. It's affecting more and more people on a daily basis. Not only the safety of drivers, the safety of the driving public, because you're as a last resort parking on shoulders, parking on exit ramps. It's becoming a national highway safety issue. So we're really proud of the work we've done with frankly, some of our enemies within the industry on other issues to get their support for this, and bringing both Republicans and Democrats together. We don't see a reason why this shouldn't happen. We just really need a focus on the Senate to get some action, get some things moving over there.
Okay. So
I was just taking a look at the chat, and I don't mean to steer the conversation, but I was going to say this.
That's exactly where I was going. All right.
Yeah. So no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. So look, we did have a few questions in the chat. Thank you so much for your attention on that too.
Well, I was just going to say, because it really segued, talking about truck parking, kind of, how do we set our goals, or how do we set our agenda? And as Colin was saying, it really is what we're hearing from our members, and truck parking is a perfect example of that.
Right. Okay, so great. So D, you just heard that it is from the owner operators, from the members themselves. That was a funny question, though. Do you take a survey? But
we do too. We do surveys of our members. Yeah, we do. So we do surveys of our members. It's it's a combination of things. We survey our members across the board. We also, we take what we're hearing from our members. As Colin said at the outset here, we offer business services. So we'll get members calling in saying like, hey, I'm having trouble filing this form, or hey, I'm getting dinged on this sort of citation. What's going on here? And maybe that's something where we can do something about it at the federal level. And then we also have our board of directors that's made up of truckers. So we take our guidance from them. So it's a number of different ways that we kind of set our goals.
Right. Okay. Perfect. And we did have. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much, Ms. Ayers. Thanks for sharing the timely information. This is a comment from the chat. You can find your representatives at house.gov or call 202-224-3121. Voice your opinion on truck parking and all things transportation. So I appreciate you putting that information. Thank you so much. We did have Melissa. She put a question way earlier about California. Why are they the folks that is leading, this effort as far as AB5, and she was just wondering, is it because of autonomous vehicles, and their push towards autonomous vehicles? We all know that, anybody running a truck, if you plan on going into California, you have even more stringent, what is it? The CARB, all of the regulations regarding your air, emissions, everything is already more stringent in California. So the push for autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles is definitely big there. Do you feel as though that is one of the, agendas at play?
I kind of think, I'm not sure. That's honestly not something that I've heard of or thought about before. I do think there may be a connection in that, as we've talked about, AB5 has been pushed in large part by the unions and by Teamsters and by organized labor. So I think insofar as something like AB5 might result in more people becoming employees who could be unionized, maybe that's a way of, unions playing a long game to try and address some of the concerns they might have about the development of autonomous vehicles. But that also may be giving them too much credit. I'm not sure. I don't know for sure. We haven't really heard that, but I do think there is some connection between, AB5, the ability, having more employees who have the ability to organize, and what does that mean for the development of autonomous vehicles and trucking. So I think there is some connection there, but I don't know that it's necessarily one of the big reasons why they would have done this.
Yeah, everything in trucking is interconnected. I mean, you can't.
Yeah.
It's the butterfly effect on an industry-wide scale. So I'm sure there is something involved there. Honestly, I'm with Bryce, though. I don't think we've thought about that enough to give a real responsible answer for it, but it's probably something we're going to talk about over coffee tomorrow morning when we get to the office. So I guess we'll come back on that one.
Okay, well, cool. Look, I'm not seeing any questions, and I threw it out there
Sorry, I got
quite
a
some
little
time ago. Okay, yeah, I got you, Desi. I am going to turn off hand raising though, just because we are going to be respectful of these brothers' time. Okay, all right, Desi, what's up, man? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm out of the matrix. I'm back in the A. So what I wanted to say is, how did we get here? And that was Aisha Ayers. She put the contact information. When I met Louis Pugh and Norita, we were
Yeah.
talking about, and one
Mm-hmm.
of the first things we did, I tested them out. I was like, do you think there's a conspiracy? And to some level, there is in terms of think about the likelihood of somebody moving out of the state of California to move their business so they can remain entrepreneurs, or them going to work for a mega carrier. The likelihood is, the probability is higher that they'll ever go work for a mega carrier. And I say all that to say drivers they yield too much power, kind of like what we found out during the pandemic, in that a lot of people found it's better for me to work for myself as opposed to work for
Mm-hmm.
the pennies and nickels that they're paying me when I could be
Mm-hmm.
getting dollars. So that kind of like highlights the spirit of entrepreneurialism, and it's kind of why a lot of people choose to buy their own truck, because it gives them a bargaining chip at the table. Whereas when you're a company driver, you go where you're told, you do what you're told, you're off when they say you could be off, and all of the above. So you don't have no control in your life, and the pay really sucks in comparison to what you could do, even from a semi level, on your own. So I think that's the conspiracy level for myself. But beyond all that, I'm a root cause person. So I asked the question, how do we get here? We got here because there's millions and millions of truckers, owner operators across the nation. So the fact that it's only 150,000 members of OOIDA is kind of pathetic. I'm just calling myself and all of my brethren out in the industry, brother and sister out in the industry. Reason being, you don't even have to be a member of OOIDA to vote. They have call to actions. These are things I've learned over the year plus relationship that I've dealt with Louis and Narita. So what I'm saying is we've got to go to the polls. And like Jory, you highlighted a great point. It's not only the people who play an active role, be it brokers, dispatchers, or whomever in transportation. It's the family members, because family members are
Mm-hmm.
impacted by what happens to me or the driver on the road. We're impacted. So we got to hit the polls in large numbers so we can start, I definitely tip my hat to OOIDA and the work you guys do on the Hill. But you guys are vastly outnumbered in terms of the lobbyists, the ATA, and God knows whoever else trying to keep,
Yep.
keep their power, keep the power gavel in their hand in their favor, versus, what you guys are doing. And you are one of the only known agencies that I know advocate for those in the trucking industry, trucking and logistics space. So that's a great work, but we got to have more of that. We got to, I always say that politics starts at home. Get on your local politicians' butt so
Yep.
they'll, you know, get code enforcement off of you. Say, hey, these are my constituents. They contribute to my campaign, and you got to really let them know, man. You got to really go to those city hall meetings and let them know. You go well dressed, and have a well-groomed guy like Jory go represent us if I'm on the road. You know what I mean? But we got to do these things in order to gain some footing. We're not outnumbered. We're out organized. And we got to really, like, all these people with tens and hundred thousands of followers, we got to, like, really ignite the people who listen to us and, want to emulate what we're doing in the industry. We got to, like, ignite our fan base to go to the polls. And not only parking is a big cog in the wheel, but it's not the only one. That
No.
attention times and things like that really hit home with me. So we really gotta, like, get our voices heard. And we're millions. We're not small in number. We have a little bit of money in our hand, even though it seems that one of the bigger agendas is to keep, a lot of that money and power out of our hands. So, and I'll close with this, is that we definitely got to. I kind of lost my thought. I have a pre-geriatric moment. But yeah, we just got to go to the polls and organize a bit more than what we're doing, and we'll be able to change the narrative. We'll be able to get some things going in our favor. Will it ever be fair? No. But can we make it better than what we found it? Yes. And that's the aim. That should be all our aims, that financially benefit and who have loved ones, in the industry. That should be our aims, and I'll just land the plane with that.
All right.
If I may, you're absolutely right. And one of the frustrations I actually have with truckers, if I'm being quite honest, is this hesitation to talk to lawmakers because they don't understand politics quite as much as an elected official would. But you know what? That's a cop out, because you're going there to talk about trucking policy. You know trucking better than they do. You're the expert when it comes to trucking. Talk about the issues that affect you. You'll find that they're much more attentive when someone they represent comes in and says, let me kind of educate you on an issue you probably don't know anything about. Let's be honest, elected officials probably don't know much about trucking. So you're the actual expert. They'll take care of the politics, they'll take care of the legislative process. But if you get in there and share your expertise with them on any number of issues, that's how you light a fire. That's how things start moving in the right direction. And we could use a lot more of that to support our efforts here in Washington, D.C. So, amen. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I'll 100% agree with that. And I think you raised a point that's so important. It is about developing those relationships with your lawmaker. And like Colin said, what you want to have is a lawmaker who views you as the expert. So when an issue comes up, they know who to reach out to and they know who to ask questions on. So, and that just makes such a huge difference. Kind of bringing it back around to, our experience on Capitol Hill before coming to OOIDA, you can see when a lawmaker knows that they have this constituent that runs this kind of business. That's who they go to when a piece of legislation comes across their desk. So it is as simple as just introducing yourself, especially on an issue like truck parking. That's an easy one to talk about, where you can just make that positive connection and hopefully start to build that relationship.
Well, perfect. Desi, I appreciate you for definitely emphasizing that. Get out and vote, folks. Get out and meet those people who make those decisions so that you are putting the right folks to make decisions on your behalf, on behalf of the folks who you love. So, again, Desi, I truly appreciate that, brother. Man, OOIDA, we talked about this right before this started, that this is an ongoing conversation. We definitely want to have you guys back, especially as more starts to happen with AB5. The education piece of things is definitely needed within the community. And, between Desi and myself, we're definitely happy to be able to partner with you guys to do more education type events, whether it be in person, virtual, here on Clubhouse. whatever the case may be. Those are things that we're very, very passionate about, educating the people. So, I'm just going to throw that offer out there. Did you guys have anything that you wanted to say, as we close out the room?
I would just say, and to Desi's point, he mentioned the importance of detention time. We're talking about AB5, we're talking about truck parking, we're talking about overtime pay, but we cover a lot of ground here in Washington, D.C. Detention time is a priority for us as well. So we're happy to come back and talk about just about anything involving trucking, because there's probably action going on in Washington, D.C. that we can update folks on, so they're aware of what's happening and what we're trying to do on behalf of drivers in any number of issues.
Okay. I'd love to talk about detention pay. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And I would just want to say thank you for the opportunity to come on here. We really appreciate it. And for anyone who wants to stay up to date on what we're working on, I know Colin mentioned it, but it's fightingfortruckers.com. You don't have to be a member. But you can check out, what we're doing, put your email in there, get updates on different legislation that we're highlighting. So yeah, it's just a really good way to stay on top of what's going on at the federal level in Congress.
Okay, perfect. Let me actually, I was in the middle of texting somebody here in the app. You said fighting www.
Yep, fightingfortruckers.com.
Truckers.com. So fightingfortruckers.com. Boom.
Yep.
That is that. All right. It looks like somebody tried to sneak one last question in.
Go for it.
What is OOIDA's greatest, most significant win for truckers?
Ooh, that's tough.
Right. Digging deep for that one.
If we go back in time, I think fuel surcharges were mainly the work of OOIDA. I think that probably was a major accomplishment for us. But I'm going to say we're gonna have a breakthrough on trucking before too
Truck
long.
parking.
I think. Oh yeah, sorry, truck parking. Jeez, we're gonna have a breakthrough on truck parking before too long, and I think that is really going to be something we take a lot of pride in, because it's been a long time coming. It's long overdue, and it's, like I said earlier, it's something that we've really been leading the charge on since day one. So we'll be really proud of that. Bryce, you got a different perspective?
No, I don't think I have a different perspective, but I think just it's also really important to highlight I know Colin mentioned how many different issues we're involved on, and there's so many issues where we are the only ones out there fighting on it. Colin already mentioned it, but FLSA, there would not be a bill introduced on FLSA if we were not talking about this. There's the issue about increases to minimum insurance requirements. We led a coalition of over 50 or 60 groups to make sure that wasn't part of the infrastructure bill. So I think there's a lot of little things where we're really leading the charge, where big carriers either don't care about it or are on the opposite side of it.
Yeah.
And you have safety groups and labor groups that are on the other side too. So
yeah, insurance is a great example. A lot of times, and it's difficult as a lobbyist to not have these big legislative achievements, but a lot of times some of the best work we do for our members is preventing bad policies from happening. And insurance is a great example of that. I mean, an increase to $5 million to $1 million as a minimum threshold for liability coverage would have destroyed small business truckers. And we were able to make sure that didn't see the light of day. So we're really pleased about that. But again, that doesn't necessarily get the type of attention or praise we kind of secretly hope for as lobbyists. But that's why we're so hopeful about truck parking, because we'll actually have something tangible to deliver for truckers, something that passes both chambers of Congress, and we can say, look what we did.
Right. Okay. So Norita came out and said that Minnesota checklist, Truth in Leasing, Tennessee Commerce Commission. I'm imagining those are also some wins for you guys.
Yeah, I'm not going to call out Norita. She's been with the organization a little bit longer than we have, so her memory goes back a little further. But yeah, those are all probably big accomplishments. They're just not first and foremost on my mind.
Okay. All right. Well, cool.
Sorry, Norita.
Norita, I definitely appreciate you, Norita, for helping us get this whole situation set up. I truly appreciate you, madam. And again, D, that was a great question. I mean, you like 3 for 3. If you guys don't know, I shout D out all the time. I've been working with D for at least 4 years, maybe even 5 years. I truly appreciate her services as a broker. So if you have, a box truck or a dry van, or kind of any equipment type, she can hook you up. She is definitely a professional. So reach out to her. Yeah, but that's basically it, fellas. Well, my bad. Hey, Desi, did you want to say anything before we close out the room?
Not just we gotta hold. It comes back to accountability. When we were talking about the vote, the people that's on the hill, a lot of people always look at the president, um, but we got to look at those elected officials. Again, it starts at the local level.
Hmm.
When you start to see people in your counties, be it Fulton, Rockdale, or wherever you reside, you got to let them know we're not just. And what we do, we suffer in silence. We get angry when our trucks get booted or there's nowhere for us to park, and we don't say anything. We gotta go to those elected officials, not as an individual. We gotta go as a group, and we gotta hold them accountable. Say, hey, bro, I voted for you. There's thousands of more people in the same community that voted for you. We contributed to your campaign, and if you don't, contribute some to relief to what's going on against us, we're gonna vote you up. We're gonna get somebody that will. But we
Hmm.
gotta hold them accountable. It's politics kind of work as simple as that. You know, so we got to move in that direction. Again, big shout out to Narita, man. They've been in the trenches for a long time. She kind of set this up. Aisha works, a lot, in that regard as well. So man, we just got to keep chomping at the bits and make this thing happen, and we'll get some wins, and and in doing so, we'll leave the industry better than we found it. And that's all I got.
Gotcha. Well, look, man, I appreciate you so much again for that alley, Desi. I truly appreciate that, brother. Gentlemen, Bryce, Colin, thank you so much for joining me here on stage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Everybody, yes, sir, yes, sir. Thank you so much for the support. The Transportation and Logistics Clubhouse is now over 26,000 members. Every single week, every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're bringing you content that we are praying brings value into your life. Maybe it educates you on current events, or it teaches you how to do your job better, give you some efficiencies that some people really moving and shaking have found, and sharing with you right here, live and direct. So again, I appreciate all the support over the last year and a half. Join us on Monday as we partner with FreightWaves. We're going to be telling you where to position your trucks to take advantage of market conditions. And next week we got a very special guest. I'm gonna save the name, but I am excited to interview this brother. And without further ado, everybody, y'all just have a blessed one. Thank you again, folks.